Well, thank you so much for joining me. This is such a great opportunity to be able to interview you, especially because your brand new book, Story Sell, just came out. It just came in the mail yesterday for me. And no, that's not true. Well, I was away on a trip, and so I was able to start piling through it the last couple of days. And so it's probably got to feel great at this point, right? You've worked so hard, and now the book is out there.
It's great. The problem is you automatically now move on to the next book. In the same way, in the same way this morning, Jason Tatum and Jalen Brown and the rest of the Celtics are probably already starting to think of next season. I have to now think of the next book.
Yes. Oh my goodness. And what
Yeah.
what number book was this?
Well, I've written 6 novels, and that was my third book of nonfiction. So 9 books altogether.
My
Yeah.
goodness. That's just incredible.
It's
That's
crazy.
absolutely. I mean, it's
Yeah.
probably it's like
I'm
asking a
very
parent
blessed.
who's your favorite. It's probably hard to answer which one's your favorite.
It is, although I tend to think the first one because I never thought I would publish a book.
Yes.
So the first one felt like it felt like a miracle. The others still feel miraculous, but they don't feel like a miracle, which is that's how the first one felt.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Oh, I love it. That's fantastic. And it's so fascinating, when I saw that you were, because I'm on your email list and loved having you on the podcast, last year and had great conversations with our listeners from it. And when I reached out, I thought, this is fantastic because now for some of the work I'm doing, I'm reading, your story and I'm like, okay, I love this. I want to kind of walk in those footsteps. I love how you're partnering with Fortune 500 companies and helping them tell better stories. And did you ever think, when you released, I mean, story worthy, right? Like, did you ever think you'd be at this place where you're, the list of companies you've worked with in here? I mean, it's awesome. Did you ever think it would be at this point?
No, I often tell my wife, or she tells me, it's so weird what I do these days. I was just in Washington, D.C. last week working with the hostage negotiation unit of the FBI. And I thought, this is crazy, and then I was in Arizona 3 days ago speaking to a large technology company that you've probably already touched once today. Like, it's just, yeah, it was unexpected, and I never thought it would happen, and honestly, companies have sort of brought me along kicking and screaming because I never thought what I knew would be helpful to them, and it turns out it is.
Wow. All while,
Yeah.
holding down a very important day job, which
Yes. Yeah.
many people
My,
kind of in the keynote speaking, corporate training, consulting, authoring space that you're also in probably don't have that day job.
right. Well, I like kids. I'm an elementary school teacher, and I just love
Yes.
the kids, so I can't escape it, at least not yet.
Wow. That's incredible.
Yeah.
Absolutely phenomenal. And let's not forget the DJ business. I mean, is that still up and going?
It is. My partner is tending to do more weddings these days with his son, who's now a grown person. So I have done maybe half a dozen weddings over the last year or so. I just tend to be busy now. When he says, "Hey, we have a wedding on this day," I
Yep.
say, "I'm delivering a speech at a conference, so I can't do it."
Yep.
But it was at a time. There was a time when it was, every weekend, multiple times a weekend. It was, a primary source of revenue that I'm happy to not have to do as much anymore.
Yes. Hauling the equipment in and the late nights.
Yeah, actually, the problem really was it's the most stressful thing I had to do
Mm,
because it's a couple's most important day. If
yeah,
I
absolutely.
deliver a so-so speech, for some conference, like nobody's life is ruined from it, and even if I do a bad math lesson, I'll just teach it again tomorrow. But you
Right.
get one shot at making a wedding perfect for a couple, and the pressure I would feel on those days was tremendous. So
Oof.
to relieve myself of that stress has been really wonderful.
Yes,
Yeah.
mispronouncing names is not the time to do that at a wedding reception.
Right, or just, like, your equipment failing, like, "Oh,
Right?
wow, my mixer has died. I have another one in the car, but we will now be waiting 15 minutes in silence while I hopefully get the next one in quick enough," none of those things actually ever happened, but I lived in fear of them all the time.
Right. Well, I love it. I've been so inspired by watching your journey, especially with the storytelling stuff that I looked up because I'm here in Tampa to see if um, uh, is it Moth GrandSLAM that you do storytelling
Yep, the moth.
through? Yeah, so I was looking to see if they have chapters here in Tampa because I'm
Yep.
like, I've been telling stories for most of my life. Absolutely love storytelling. Your books have kind of, brought some of that, full circle. I've just recently kind of got into 5 minute open night, mic nights, but boy, I love the power of being able to tell a story and weave it all the way through. So I was looking, I was like, you inspired me to kind of, all right, I gotta look over here to see what they have available.
I'm so glad. Yeah, I think everyone should be telling stories, so I'm thrilled.
I love it. And I can't tell you even how many people I've, pushed not pushed, but encouraged them to do the story journal and, all the stuff that you lay out in Storyworthy and just kind of keeping track of all that has been awesome. Well, let's talk about this book because, especially so many of our listeners are in sales. They're financial advisors. They're sales executives. They're working one on one with clients. They're working with companies, or they're working for their company and they're going, how do I tell the story of our company better to our clients? How do I bring them into it? And so, this is just perfect timing. Right off the bat, why do you think so many leaders and companies just don't tell their story, or they just rely on the about section on their website? We were started in 1932 by grandpa, whatever, and that's all they do.
Well, oddly, I don't think most people understand what a story is. I think most people feel that if they report on an aspect of their life or an aspect of their company, they're now telling a story. Essentially, I'm going to tell you something that happened over the course of time when that's not a story. A story is about change over time. We used to be one thing, now we're another. We used to think one thing, now we think another. It has to be it has to be a story, has to have an arc to it. It has to feel like you started in one place, it ended in a new place, and it was a meaningful trip from A to B. So I think most of the time they're not telling stories because they don't know what a story is, and oftentimes they like to use the word storytelling as sort of a buzzword, but when it comes right down to it, they're not actually engaged in the things that make story, what they are, which is stakes and suspense and surprise and humor and vulnerability, all of those things that a story needs. They're just absent because people don't understand what a story really is supposed to be.
Yep. Yep. That's so powerful. And that's why I love right in chapter one, you jump right off with the story of Boris. Chapter one or chapter two, with the CEO of the corporation, and what a great example of leading from the top. Being able to go, no, I need to learn how to tell better stories. I love that.
Right. Yes. I describe him as a brick builder, right?
Yes.
As opposed to a band aid guy. Boris understands that if I just learn how to tell better stories, about myself, my kids, my spouse, whoever, if I just do that, then I will be a better business storyteller too. Oftentimes people think that there's storytelling for business and then there's storytelling for your personal life when
Right.
really it's all the same. Every strategy that I use when I'm on a stage performing or when I'm writing a novel, all of those strategies are the same strategy I use when helping a business person.
Wow. Absolutely incredible. And I love you go right into it right in the beginning of the book. The human brain is wired to retain stories. I started thinking about as you point out in the book how many presentations we've sat through. And some are more appealing than others, and so, others use different elements, but the moment they weave a story or a narrative throughout the presentation, it just brings it alive. uh, how would you encourage sales folks who are pitching presentations quite frequently to look for ways to bring in story to their presentations?
Well, the first thing I think they could do is so often they present themselves as sort of monoliths, these round, white, and flavorless human beings. They don't share of
Yes.
themselves. They essentially they're spokespeople, and no one in the history of the world has wanted to hear from a spokesperson.
Mm.
They want to communicate with a human being. So you should be finding ways to strategically and subtly weave in aspects of your life to the people you're speaking to. You should be using metaphors that include your children and similes that include your cats. And you should say your spouse's name. And if you play golf, you should make a reference to a 9 iron. And if you love the Celtics, you should make a reference to Peyton Pritchard. Like, you should
Yes.
become a human being when you're presenting, as opposed to, I work for a company and I have a product that I want to tell you about, right? No one wants that. So that would be the simple start, which is just share of yourself in such a way that they feel like someone is speaking to them who is not just a spokesperson.
Yep. Yep. That's such an honor. I was recently with a group of financial advisors, and the person gets up to kind of introduce the time together, and great. I mean, great leader. They were fantastic, but they kind of took what approach you're talking about. You know, they it was just very cut and dry. They didn't spend any time kind of casting the vision for the day. Let's experience something together. And then it was like, oh yeah, we have the speaker, Jason. Why don't you come up? And normally, it's like, okay, let's think through how we're gonna cast vision for the day. Let's tell a story of what's gonna happen. I was like, oh, what a miss. If we're able to
Yeah.
kind of bring people into that narrative and be able to do that. What are some of the common mistakes that leaders make when they're trying to incorporate storytelling, into their everyday life? I know you just kind of gave us one. Are there any more mistakes that we kind of wrap up into?
Well, I think what you just described is the primary mistake. It is an
Mm,
odd it's an odd circumstance that people assume attention.
oof.
I tell people that no one ever wants to hear anything you have to say unless you give them a reason to listen.
Wow.
And reviewing the agenda of the day has never been something anyone has wanted to hear. And so, regardless of whether your audience is one person or 1,000 people, you have to be entertaining at all times. Those
Yep.
things. It can be personal, it can be enlightening, it can be surprising, it can be revealing. You could just state facts that people are shocked by, that they can't believe exist. That can be entertaining.
Yep.
There's a million ways to entertain, but the odd thing is, people just assume that because you have a microphone or you're standing in front of people or you're on a
Yes.
stage, that other people will listen.
Yep.
I was just at a conference, and I like to, when I'm at a conference and I'm going to speak amongst other people, I always like to go in about 45 minutes before and sit in the back.
Mm.
And the person who was speaking before me, I just sort of monitored the room, and about half the people were on their phones while he was speaking.
Oh.
And he made no attempt to get them off their phones.
Yep.
So as soon as I got up there, the first thing I said was, "Half of you have been on your phones for the last 45 minutes. You're terrible. You're awful, soulless human beings. Put your phones down, and for the next 2.5 hours," that's how long I was speaking, "I
Oh,
am going to try like hell to keep you off your phones. And
that's
every
right.
time I see someone on the phone, I'm gonna crack a joke, I'm gonna jump on a chair, I'm gonna drop a piece of wisdom on you." Like, but that's the mindset you must have at all times.
Yep.
I think the biggest mistake people assume is that people are paying attention to them, when no one pays attention to you unless you give them a reason to.
Oof. That's so good. And that's so good for people starting out in speaking. I coach speakers, and you're so right. We just automatically assume I'm standing in front, so people are gonna no work for it. Bring me into it. Give me a reason why I should lean in and be a part of that. I love in the book you talk about how storytelling is storytelling is storytelling. And I love that. I love that. So often we try to put them in different categories. When I tell stories to my kids, when I tell stories at work, could you walk us through, unpack that a little bit? Because I just loved how you brought that in.
Yeah, you're right that people feel like there must be strategies for business, and then there's strategies for filmmakers and strategies for playwrights, and none of that is true. The same strategies that I use to tell a story on a stage or write a novel, a story in a book, are the same ones I use when helping someone prepare a sales pitch or a pitch deck or a marketing campaign. It all comes down to the things that storytellers to entertain audiences. It's stakes and a
Mhm.
meaningful arc in a story. All of those things are the same things I speak to, with business clients again and again and again. If you want to hold someone's attention, like, what are we doing to be slightly suspenseful? What are we doing to surprise our audience. Just watch Steve Jobs' 2007 iPhone launch. It is filled with stakes, suspense, surprise, humor, and even vulnerability. He does all the things that cause you to want to continue to watch everything that he's doing and everything he's saying. But so often we just don't do any of those things. We
Yeah.
become information presenters rather than, the entertainers that we have to be when we're speaking.
Absolutely. I think so many leaders confuse communication in general with, they think communication is informing or telling opposed to, well, no, communication is actually sharing. You're sharing this connection. You're, trying to kind of get connected that way. Just what you unpack there would be so helpful for so many sales executives, people who are doing presentations, because they walk into the room and they're just like, I just got to get done. I just got to get done. I got to make a strong pitch at the end instead of thinking through, wait a minute, I want to bring these people on a journey with me. Whatever I'm pitching, selling, presenting to them, I want to be able to bring in a way. But maybe sometimes they think, well, I'm not creative enough to do those things. What would you say to some of those folks who use the I'm not creative excuse?
Well, I would tell them that they're storytellers all over their lives. They've been telling
Mm,
stories all their lives, right? So uh, I'm not asking them to paint a Rembrandt, or to carve from marble. I'm asking them to do the same thing they do at the dinner table and on the golf course and on long drives with their family. They tell stories about what's happening in their day. And you
yep.
simply need to find a way to take those stories and bring them into your business world so that you can do the same thing and engage people in a meaningful way. It's not about creativity. It's simply about getting people to believe in you because people don't really
Mm,
buy your product. They buy the person who is selling the product.
wow.
My windows in my house, I had to replace all the windows in my house. I interviewed 5 different companies. I didn't buy the most expensive windows. I didn't buy the cheapest windows. I didn't even buy the best windows. I bought Trevor Devine's windows because he came into my house and he saw a 9 iron leaning against the wall and said, "Oh, I play golf. You play golf?" And we chatted for 20 minutes about golf. And then he said, "I should probably bring in the product." And I thought to myself, "Sure, you can, but I don't need to see it. I'm buying your window,
Right.
obviously." I
Right.
mean, geez, right? And it's Trevor Devine who I wanted in my life, not a particular brand of window. As long as his window, I could see through it and it kept the rain out, I'm
Yep.
good to go.
Yep.
So we can try to sell a product or we can convince people that we are the trusted source of something. And I think the latter is always better.
Ooh, that is so powerful to be the trusted source. When you talk through, I mean, you talk about the three elements: stake, suspense, and surprise. For the person who's like, oh, nothing ever happens to my life, that it's, any type of this kind of, I mean, what encouragement would you give to them to be able to find those things? Because we both know that they have them, they just have to find them.
Right. Well, all of them are much simpler than people think. A
Mm,
stake is merely a need, a want, an enemy, a problem that needs to be solved. These are all stakes, like I'm hungry and I want lunch. That is a stake, right? Like literally right now, I'm looking forward to a sandwich in a little while. That's my stake. Matt has to eat, right? So I'm looking forward to that. That can be my stake. It could be, I don't know, there's a guy named Eric who I have to play golf with tomorrow. I don't really enjoy playing golf with this guy. The stake here is how will Matt get through 9 holes of golf with a person he doesn't really enjoy playing golf with? That's a stake. So they don't have to be like I'm trying to, defeat the Russians. I'm not trying
right.
to like battle a dinosaur. It can just be, what do you want? What do you need? What is your
Yep.
company selling that someone else needs? So that's stakes. Suspense is merely the strategic inclusion of information alongside the strategic exclusion of information. It can be
Mm,
as simple as I want to have lunch and I can't wait to go upstairs because there is something in my refrigerator that I've been dying to eat for 2 days. That's suspense. That
yep.
is the strategic inclusion of information. There's something in the fridge I want to eat, alongside excluding certain information, which is, I'm not going to tell you what it is. Now you're in suspense. What does Matt want to eat so badly, right? And then surprise can just be the reveal of that suspense, particularly if it is surprising. Like if I say it's a, I don't know, if it's a walnut and carrot sandwich, that's the surprise, that's a weird thing and that can be surprising. Our lives are filled with all of these things. Anytime you know some of something, but not all of something, you're in suspense,
Mm,
right? It's why sports are so popular.
yep.
Sports are nothing but a suspense device. I went to the Boston Celtics last night, and from tip off, I was in suspense, wondering which team was going to win,
Ooh,
right? And the game is
right.
filled with surprises. There's lots of surprises. Actually, the reason sports is so popular in America today is because in almost any other story, we know who's going to win. We know
Right.
who's going to win. When you go to a movie, the good guy always wins. We don't know how, but like Captain America is not dying, right? We know that. The children in Jurassic Park are not getting eaten. We know that
Right.
already. But in sports, the bad guy sometimes wins,
Yep.
right? The Dallas Mavericks this morning are thinking the bad guy won.
Yep.
And that happens in sports, and that's real stakes when we don't actually know who's going to win. But all of these elements exist in your life, and it's just a matter of deciding how to say what needs to be said.
Ooh, how to say what needs to be said. Wow. That is powerful. You also talk in the book about how sometimes uh, starting at the beginning is really not always the best method. And so walk us through like what does that mean? Because for so many people, I was just at a conference in Nashville the last couple of days. One of the speakers gets up and he, I think, broke one of the cardinal rule of storytelling, which is I have a story to tell you. It's really funny. Guess what? Here we go. Like he like
Well, he's
walked
dead.
us through.
Yeah, he's dead. Don't
Yeah.
ever say I have a really funny story because it's never going to be as funny as what you just said,
Right.
or what you just implied. Um, we don't always start at the beginning because the beginnings of stories are often boring,
Mm,
and I think the beginning of a story is actually the most important part of a story. It's the opportunity to either get people on our plane or not.
mm.
You can tell a great story that takes us to a beautiful place, but if the plane is empty, it is irrelevant. And so the beginning of your story is your opportunity to get people to think, oh, he has something to say. This guy sounds good. This lady sounds entertaining. She's funny. That's the way we get people to pay attention to us right off the
Yep.
bat.
Yep.
And that means sometimes choosing a different place in a story to start that is going to grab people's attention, as opposed to what the real chronological beginning of a story might be, which could be pretty boring. It might be necessary to the story, but it's not necessary at the beginning because people will tune you out in the first 30 seconds if you don't grab their attention in some meaningful way. So, yeah, I think actually the beginning of a story, choosing the place to begin is sort of the key to unlocking a story. I fight to find the right beginning more than anything else in a story when I'm working on a story. Once I
Wow.
find the right beginning, everything else sort of just flows right from that. But it's the choice of the beginning that makes the most difference.
Some folks talk to me and they struggle with, okay, I've got some stories, but I'm trying to tie it in, to this message that I'm gonna do. And sometimes there's this disconnect, it seems, from them being able to go, okay, how do I take the story and then I tie this into the objective or the message, or this is why you need this new camera because it will, change things. Is there something that is there a flip that gets switched in leaders' minds when they start to dive into story enough? Or is this just something that they just need to keep working the muscle so they find, oh, wait a minute, that's right, when I forgot to put the car in reverse and it rolled down the hill, that's the point of the story. Why do they struggle sometimes connecting the point and the objective that they need with the story?
Well, I'll say two things. One is yes, reps count. The more stories you tell, the better you're going to get. And that means telling stories to your kids and your spouse and your neighbors and your parents as much as you can. And really, the best way to do this is to tell stories to strangers, because when you
Mm.
tell stories to people who love you, they often smile even when your story is terrible. So, I go to stages in New York and Boston and I stand in front of people who don't know me. And I know right away whether I'm doing a good job because you can tell
Yeah.
in front of strangers if they like your story or not. So I think that's important. I think the other thing people confuse about storytelling in business is oftentimes they're trying to weave a story and sort of their product or service into the story simultaneously. And what I often teach people to do is to speak with agency, which is a concept I sort of what I try to get people to do is tell a story and don't talk about your product. Just tell
Mm.
a story related to the theme, meaning, or message of that product. And then after you're done telling that story, then bring the product in. And the combination of the two, I think, creates magic. So if it's a camera company, for example, right? I'd probably be looking to tell a story about flipping through a photo album from my childhood. And I'd probably be talking about the 14 scant photos that I have from my childhood. And when I look at each one of those photos, the tiny details that I look inside and the stories that those details tell. And
Mm,
I might tell the story of a couple of those photos. If I had a slideshow, I'd put those photos up. And I'd
yep.
say, here's a photo of me by the beach with my brother and my sister. Let me tell you about the bathing suit because that bathing suit makes me think of this, right? I do that. And I wouldn't mention cameras or my company or I just get that out in an entertaining way. And then when that entertaining, engaging, meaningful, memorable story is done, I'd say, that is why we sell cameras.
Whew.
And that is why you need our camera,
Yep.
right? Because someday in the future, someone's going to be looking at an image that you've taken. Do you want that image to exist? Do you want it to exist with clarity? Do you want it to exist with precision, right? Do you want it to exist with composition, right? But we don't have to do the two at the same time. We
Right.
tell the story, and when we're done telling the story, we explain why we told the story. And it's the why that is always the product, the service, the
Yep.
company. But we start with a story because that allows us to be entertaining, engaging, and gain people's trust.
Wow, I love that. As you starting to roll out that pitch, I was taken back to, Don Draper moments as he was,
Yeah,
laying
right.
out. I mean, it was just masterful. Like, love that.
Right. Yeah, and it's not hard for us to do though. Don Draper is, you know, presented as a brilliant wizard of advertising, but if we just recognize that what happens to us, the content in our lives can immediately be applied to the work that we do.
Yep.
Once we really believe that and understand that, suddenly everything gets a lot easier and we can be Don Draper.
Oh, oh, I love that. You talked about just a minute ago telling the story about the beach and this bathing suit and all that kind of stuff. I'm under the impression that as we're doing our sales pitches, our presentations, whatever environment you're in, whether it's a keynote or a boardroom, whatever it is, you just can't go wrong with utilizing technology to bring pieces of your story together. So whether it's showing a picture of the beach or showing a picture of you, at the beach or whatever it is, I'm just amazed at how often leaders, people presenting, don't think of those elements. Do you think you can ever go wrong, bringing in, uh, whether it's props or images or a video clip, or is there a place of no return where it's too much? I mean, just talk to us about that for a second.
I do think that well, you can go wrong for sure. I've actually never seen a good pitch deck in my life.
Mm.
Almost always because most pitch decks fail to account for human cognition. Every pitch deck I've ever seen is slides loaded with text, and you are speaking while your audience is looking at a slide loaded with text, which asks the audience to do one of three things. Don't listen to me, read my slide.
Oof.
Don't look at my slide, listen to me,
Yep.
or the worst of the case, which is try to do both at the same time,
Yep.
right? Which is just stupid. And people do it all the time. They have a slide with 40 words on it and they're talking while the 40 words are sitting on. And I say, "What do you expect people to do?" Like they literally cannot do both and you've presented them with both, right?
Right.
Um, you've said have an ice cream and have a steak and do it at the same time. It's just
Yep.
not possible. So I do think that pitch decks are often terrible. I think what you described is a much better version of a pitch deck. Just look at what Steve Jobs does.
Right.
Just make a pitch deck like Steve Jobs, which is minimal words, highlighting things that were already said, and images. But I do think one of the things that Jobs does and effective speakers do is they tend to have more blank slides than they have slides with actual images on them. When I
Mm.
hand my pitch deck into someone, I've gotten emails that said, "Matt, your pitch deck has a problem. There's all blank slides." And I say, "No, no, that's what I want. Because if I don't have something to show you, I don't want you looking at anything but me." So I think you
Oh,
can overdo it with too many images. I think you're right that images, video, a graph that can't be described, and is better seen, those things are great in a to a degree. The
yeah.
thing that people should be looking at most when you're speaking is you. And you need to know that every time you put something on a slide, they're not looking at you anymore. So it better be great because you're supposed to be the best damn thing in the room.
Yep.
And so if I'm putting something on a slide, it's assisting with cognition because I've put 3 topics I'm gonna cover, and I want them to see 1 topic, and then the 2nd topic, and then the 3rd topic, right?
Yep.
But it's not gonna be the topic and then 19 words describing the topic. I'm describing the topic. That's just up there for you to keep a frame of reference as to what I'm
Right.
talking about. So, you better make sure that what is on the deck is either helping cognition or supporting your story or showing something that you couldn't describe otherwise. And most of the time, none of these things are actually true.
Wow. 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 Amazing. One of the things you talk about in the book is zigging while others zag to kind of stand out from the competitors. Like what's a
Yeah.
practical example of that looks like? Because I think so often, like we were just kind of mentioning throughout, we get into the same. Our pitch decks look the same. We look the same. The presentation looks the
Mhm.
same. There's nothing to stand out. Like how do we
Right.
do that?
Well, we start telling stories that other people aren't telling
Mm.
is a good start. Domino's in 2009 rolls out a campaign that says our pizza sucks. You've been telling us for years that our pizza sucks, and
Yes.
guess what? Our pizza sucks. Look at the stock chart for Domino's since 2009. It's beating the S&P 500 by a lot. Right? That is a company that said we're going to be vulnerable and we're going to tell a story that no one else is telling, which is we need to do better.
Yep.
Benji and my DJ partner when we started our DJ company, right? We had a choice when we went to a bridal show. We knew that all the other companies back in the days of CDs before music was digitized,
Yep.
all the companies were selling the size of their CD collection and they were playing music and doing light shows.
Yep.
And Benji and I said to ourselves, because we had both been married, we had both gone through weddings, we said to ourselves, that stuff doesn't matter. What we want is people who can help us on the day of our wedding.
Yeah. Yeah.
Excuse me.
Yep.
We want people who are going to like, we need a chair for grandma. We're going to get the chair for you. You want a parent, you want to dance with your father, but you don't really like your father. How can we make that happen so he's happy and you're in that regard? Um, our booth at the bridal show had no music and no equipment at a table with an ugly red flyer on it. We tried to make an ugly, memorable red flyer, and we had people come in and we just told them stories. We
Mm.
didn't tell them about our music collection. We didn't tell them about how many happy clients we had. We just said, "Tell us about your wedding. Where is it?" And we told stories, and they became convinced that we were people they wanted to work with. And I did some research for the book. I think we had a 100% conversion rate for the first like 3 years of our company. We never met a client that didn't book us for the first 3 years, and I think our conversion rate stands at like 98% right now, simply because we always weren't going to fight on music. We don't want to fight on that turf. We didn't want to fight on the lighting and special effects turf. We decided to fight on the 2 guys who you like, who
Yep.
you want at your wedding, that you might have invited to your wedding if they weren't already working for you. That was our mindset. We
Yep.
wanna be the kind of guys they'd say, like, "Let's invite them to the wedding. They sound fun,"
Yep.
right? "Actually, don't invite us, pay us, and we will come, and we will make your wedding fun." That's what we fought on. But that's the zigging while other people are zagging. It's
Yep.
looking at the market and saying, "What is everyone else fighting on? Let's go find a different turf to fight on."
Boy, I love that. I love that. If we just take a couple steps back and rethink some things, maybe look at our competitors and go, okay, everybody, here's a similar thing they're doing. Let's kind of go in a different route. As we kind of round the corner and close up. I love your chapter on how to be funny. I'm always drawn to humor and laughter because for the most part, people tell me all the time, well, I'm just not funny. I just can't be funny. And what do you think about that? Is there a percentage of people who they just aren't wired that way? Obviously, their face, shows the world that because they never smile, they never, But uh, I just don't, I just don't agree. But I'm just always curious, with people who, like you, who know and have opportunities to help other people, figure some of those kind of things out. And so I'd love your thoughts on that.
Sure. Well, no one's born funny. No one emerges from the womb with humor.
Mm,
I'll also say that I will push back on the idea that you can tell that someone's not funny because they're not smiling. Stephen Wright is a brilliant comic who's never smiled once in his life, and he's
Good point.
hilarious. So,
Good point.
uh, I tend to think people are funny for one of three reasons. It's either they didn't get enough attention as a kid, and they
Mm.
discovered that humor was a way to get attention,
Yep.
or they're outstanding listeners and they learned to hear what made people laugh and they reproduced it themselves, or they got obsessed with comedy around the age of 14, dove into Saturday Night Live, and have been obsessed ever since.
Yeah.
Those
Yep.
tend to be the three. But that tells you that humor is teachable, which it absolutely is. I have taught many people how to be funny because humor is nothing more than the deploying of strategies. It's just there are strategies that you can use to make people funny. And once you learn some of the strategies, I teach them in workshops. You can't even watch a stand up like special anymore without you seeing them deploy the strategies one after another. It doesn't mean that there aren't some people who are quicker, quicker witted, and they see the world in a more unique way than most people. Those tend to be the funniest people.
Yep.
But you can be funny. I've turned very unfunny people into funny. It doesn't mean that you can immediately become funny sort of in your life as you're moving through your life. But in a prepared way, if you're a salesperson who wants to be funny in your sales pitch, if you're a CEO and you're delivering a keynote and you want to be funny, we can craft humor into those things. And I can teach you how to craft your own humor into those things as well. So it's not a, when someone says you're born funny, those
Yeah.
are people who want to be perceived as special. They
Mm.
want to be perceived as someone who came out of the womb with a sense of humor. And it's just not the case. It is a skill developed over time and can be learned as well.
Oh, I love it. Okay, going way back to the beginning of the conversation, as we were kind of hitting on a few TV shows, I'm just so curious. Are there a couple that you would put in your storytelling Hall of Fame that just from beginning to end, boy, the way that they told stories throughout the series, they just are in the storytelling Hall of Fame for you?
Well, I guess the Breaking Bad, Better Call Saul, those 2 series, one is a prequel to the other. They're pretty great in terms of the arc of a character over time, both of those characters, Walter White and Saul Goodman. Those are pretty fantastic. I actually Mad Men is pretty fantastic too to watch the evolution of some of the characters in that show over time. That was an addictive show for me. Here's a random one that I think is so great. The brand new, it's not brand new anymore. The second version of Battlestar Galactica
Mm,
was a show that I wanted to watch, and I was worried that my wife would want to watch it with me because when she watches a show with me, it takes forever for us to get together to watch a show.
yeah.
So I showed her the 2-hour movie that began the series, hoping she wouldn't like it, and she really liked it. And I didn't realize she had just given birth to our first child, which means a lot of nursing. So we ended up watching that show and like we binge watched it over the course of 2 months while my wife was nursing the baby. And that show we still talk about to this day. We watched that show 15 years ago now because Clara's 15. 15 years ago, we watched that show together and we still talk about it.
Wow.
It's a really fantastic show, and my wife is not a sci-fi fan,
Yeah.
but but it's not it's it's a great story wrapped in a sci-fi package. So
Oh,
that is an Easter egg one that you should go and watch. You should find it and watch it. It's fantastic.
I love it. For whatever reason, I think of Dwight Schrute, his famous Bears beats
Oh yeah.
Battlestar Galactica.
Yes. Well, and The Office actually probably The Office might be my favorite television show of all time.
Oh, wow.
It petered out a little, like, the last couple
Sure.
seasons were not, it might have benefited from ending a little sooner, but,
Yeah.
I lived Jim and Pam and Dwight, I lived those people, they felt like they were my friends.
Yep.
So, yeah.
Absolutely. Ah, powerful, powerful. Well, I have overstayed the amount of time that I told you for this interview, Matthew. I can't thank you enough. Your book, I'm already loving it, and I can't thank you enough. We're gonna make sure this is in the Speak with People community group, and we'll send it out to our email list. Is there anywhere that you want to send people specifically to get more information about you and what you do?
Well, they can go to matthewdix.com, or if you're interested just in storytelling, you can go to storyworthy.com. And that's where I have lots of free resources and courses and a membership program. There's lots of opportunities for you to engage in storytelling there as well.
Yep. And your email is great. It's just chocked full of just helpful information and practical tips. And so I would highly encourage our listeners to make sure you sign up for the email. And I thank you for this time. You encourage me from afar. Love all that you're doing and hope to, kind of keep following in your footsteps. So appreciate it.
Thank you. Thanks so much. I appreciate the opportunity.